Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Mnuchin, I'd like to turn to Rusal, an aluminum company largely owned by Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska. As you know, in April 2018, the Treasury Department sanctioned Deripaska and Rusal as part of a targeted strategy against oligarchs believed to be close to Putin and were designed to punish him for subverting Western democracies. The Treasury Department lifted those sanctions in December 2018. Mr. Deripaska, as you know, was detailed in the Mueller report to have financial dealings with Paul Manafort, who is now in jail. Earlier this year, the Associated Press reported that Manafort began collecting $10 million a year in 2006 from Deripaska to advance Putin's interest in Western governments. In June 20th of 2016, Mr. Manafort was named Trump's campaign chair. Less than 2 weeks later, on June 7th, he asked an overseas intermediary to pass the following message along to Deripaska, quote, "If he needs private briefings, tell him we can accommodate." 2.5 years later, sanctions were lifted, and shortly after that, Rusal announced it was investing $200 million into a project in Kentucky. In April this year, you testified in this committee that you delisted those sanctions against Rusal because, this is your quote, "The company approached us, not the oligarch. The company approached us, a large group of people," unquote. Was Senator McConnell among the people who approached you?
I'm not really sure what this has to do with housing reform. But
Sir, the trust in our financial system depends on the entire system.
Again, I'm happy to answer.
Okay.
I don't see the relevance to housing reform, but no, I've never spoken to Mitch McConnell about that, other than when we briefed the entire Senate, Republicans and
prior to lifting the
others
sanctions.
on the sanctions.
Did Secretary Chow approach you to lift those sanctions?
No, he did not.
Did any member of Congress, House or Senate approach you with respect to lifting those sanctions?
Not that I can recall, but we had extensive discussions with many people on what we would be doing about lifting the sanctions.
Did Craig Brouchard of Brady Industries approach you about lifting those sanctions?
I'm not even sure I'm aware of who that is, so no.
Brady Industries is the company that is a substantial beneficiary of that investment in Kentucky.
Like I said, I'm not aware of who that is.
Did anyone associated with Brady Industries approach you about lifting those sanctions?
Again, as I've testified before, we lifted these sanctions because
okay, just a yes or no is fine. I'm just asking whether you understand. Now, I get to that because of the news from this last week. Last week, it was reported that in December of 2018, largely contemporaneous with your decision to lift sanctions, there was a seizure of documents from Terrace Services Ltd. This was a London-based company owned by Mr. Deripaska, real estate firm that he controlled. As that raid has been described, or that raid was described as being, quote, in connection with the special counsel investigation, that of course being the one led by Mr. Mueller. This raid is substantially contemporaneous with the Treasury Department's lifting of sanctions, and you appreciate, I'm sure, how bad this all looks. So the question is, did you have any knowledge of the raid or the preparation for the raid at the time you were making a decision to lift those sanctions?
Again, I find it interesting when we're here to discuss housing reform that you're trying to grill me on something that happened months ago.
Sir, I would reiterate, sir, that if you could isolate risk in the financial sector, Lehman Brothers would still be here today. I'm concerned about whether or not people trust that the Treasury Department is acting in the best interest. Yes or no, did you have knowledge of the raid or the preparation for the raid at the time you decided to lift sanctions?
No, I had no basis of knowing the raid or involvement with the special counsel.
And in any of the answers that you've given me, can I assume that your lack of knowledge can be applied to the entire Treasury Department? Were there people in the Treasury Department who you believe would have had knowledge?
Of course you can't assume that. I'm not making representations for what's obviously 1,000 people within the Treasury Department. Again,
so then one final question.
Concerns, we're happy to discuss them with you at the appropriate time.
Okay, so one final question, and I appreciate your willingness to share. Will you commit here today to ensure that the employees of the Treasury Department under your control will comply with any congressional subpoenas relating to these matters?
What I will assure you is that we will follow the law as reviewed by our general counsel. So I think, as you know, we've already received subpoenas that we did not think were legal. And again, I will refer them to my general counsel, and they will be reviewed. But I can assure you we will always follow the law. That is our intent.
Let's hope so. I yield back.